Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider joining you on this 6th of November. Thanks for watching the Alaska Weather Show. And as always, we encourage you to stay up to date with all the local warnings, watches, and advisories shown on our weather page. Weather.gov/Alaska is your free resource to weather around Alaska. And as you'll join the page here at some point, you'll be able to see a lot of colors on the map. Now, the colors simply mean a watch, warning, or advisory. The red is bad, that means a warning, and that means weather's happening right now, something that could be at the level that would endanger you or your property. We want you to know about it. We'd like you to take action and prevent it or prevent your danger to it. If it is yellow, it's an advisory, and that simply means it is a lower level warning. It's still a type of an alert. That means bad weather is happening. And we typically use these for low-end amounts of snow or wind or ice, something that is certainly worth noting and being careful of, but maybe not as bad as what a warning would be. And if you see orange, which we don't have on our map tonight, that simply means watch. A watch is watch out. Bad weather's coming. It's not here yet. Some things may change, but we want you to know about it so you can prepare for it and get out of the way of it or take necessary precautions to prevent any damage to you or your property if it is on the way. So let's get to the warnings tonight. The weather in Southwest has been pretty bad. Areas from Southwest coast all the way up the upper Kuskokwim, Antioch, Sleet Mute have picked up substantial amounts of freezing rain, all the way from 1.5 inches closer to the coast, including places like Bethel, out toward Eek, and then ranging to more of about 1/4 inch or 1/8 of an inch as you head upriver. That's pretty bad. When you're talking about 1/4 inch to about 1/2 inch of ice, that's really about all it takes to start pulling or weighing down power lines. It certainly makes surfaces fairly slippery if you're trying to move around or drive around for that matter. And conditions can be pretty tricky there. We understand businesses have been closed and would encourage everyone to be extra careful until that ice melts off. And eventually it will. Conditions will warm up as we head toward the weekend. But what we see tonight is the potential for more freezing rain from the central interior, especially from Nenana southward, and then south and west toward the upper Kuskokwim and into the lower Yukon there for Grayling and villages up and down river there. It does look like there will still be a substantial amount of ice possible, maybe not as much as what we saw in some of our southwestern villages yesterday and tonight. But it does look like what we'll see here could be at least 1/4 inch in some cases, and certainly enough to impair driving conditions and make things really uncomfortably slick if you're trying to move around. The good news, as you move further north, the freezing rain issue turns into more of a snow issue, and that will be the case for Yukon through areas of Fairbanks, so you may still see just light amounts of freezing rain here in the middle Tanana Valley, and then all the way through the Koyukuk Valley in Galena and out toward areas of Unalakleet. Generally north of that, that's where the snow will be. South of Unalakleet, south of Koyukuk, south of Nenana, it looks like it's going to be freezing rain, and enough that you're going to know that there's freezing rain out there, so be prepared for that tonight. The other place we want to mention that is a different part of this weather system is areas generally north and east of Chickaloon. If you're leaving Palmer tonight and heading up the Glen Highway, you're likely going to start to run into some freezing rain. We understand conditions are already changing out there, and so we urge people to be careful if you're heading out to Glen Ellen, Gulkana, maybe as far as McCarthy. Chances are you're going to run into some freezing rain, and the road services are already changing, as we hear from 511.alaska.gov. Another great resource provided to you by the state of Alaska to check on road conditions before you go. One other thing that's a little bit different here, from Bettles out toward Ambler, the upper Kobuk and Noatak valleys there, generally looking at some stronger winds. Northeasterly winds will be coming along the Brooks Range on the south-facing slopes as we go into the next 24 hours. Those winds are going to pick up from the north and east, gusting up to about 40 miles per hour. So you're going to notice that with the wind, the snow, and the freezing rain, all working through central and western parts of Alaska and also the Copper River Valley. What a mess. This is quite a weather system. Here's what it looks like on the satellite picture. Low pressure right now, the main focus of that is just north and west of Unalaska, south of St. Paul and St. George. But it is acting like a very efficient moisture pump, pulling all of this into southwestern Alaska. And it's spreading rain into south central. So if you're in Wasilla tonight, or you're in Kenai, Soldotna, and going, ah, gosh, it's raining here, what about freezing rain here? No, it doesn't look like that's going to be the issue for you. This looks like it's going to be warming up all the way through the Susitna Valley, the Matanuska Valley for the most part, up until Chickaloon anyway, and then south of that through Kenai and Kodiak, it should be warming up, including Anchorage. But northeast of Chickaloon, we still have cold air stuck in some of the nooks and crannies of the valleys. And as that warm air is coming up and over that, the cold air is not going to go away. So it will rain all the way down, just like it normally would, except for that last little part where it runs into that cold air. And as it goes through that cold air, and that cold air has made road surfaces, your car, your sidewalk slippery, it's going to freeze on those cold surfaces. Once that happens, ice continues to build up and build up. And if it gets to that magical point, especially for power lines, 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch is that danger zone where it's too much weight of ice stuck on those power lines, and that can cause a problem and maybe disconnect your power. As always, never touch a down power line. Call the electric company, let them deal with it. They're experts, they know what they're doing. Most of the time we don't, so just be careful out there. As you take a look at the satellite picture one more time with me, look out west. Here's another disturbance trying to work in, but the amount of cold air that's made it across the northern interior and is affecting the northern Bering is going to hold that at bay. That's not going to budge much. So where do we have room to move? All the warm and wet air moving up out of the Gulf right now will be blowing into southeast, south central, the Copper River Valley, southwest, and here comes that another disturbance that's going to squeeze that moisture right over the middle Tanana Valley and into the Yukon Flats. Along this boundary is going to be wind. We expect a lot of wind to develop here on the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range as we get into the next 24 hours. Gusts in places like Ambler and Bettles should be coming up to about 40 miles per hour or so, generally from the northeast, all trying to fill the void here across the northern end of the storm. This ribbon right here from southwest all the way through the central interior, that's where the messy winter weather is going to be. We've got a lot of rain across southwest, south central, and into southeast over the next couple of days. We're not looking for major issues here around the Kenai Peninsula, Anchorage, Prince William Sound, or southeast. There may be some mixed precipitation in places like Skagway. Again, we've heard of a little bit of mixing there tonight. If you see anything, it'll be maybe an inch or less, but it does look like conditions will be warming up and will lean over toward rain. For the interior, though, 4 to 7 inches of snow is possible around parts of the middle Tanana Valley and maybe in and around Fairbanks, all the way out toward Koyukuk and south to about Unalakleet and south to about Nenana. South of Nenana, again, it looks like it's going to be freezing rain all the way out toward parts of the lower Yukon Valley. In the upper Kuskokwim Valley, it does look like there's still a chance for some accumulating freezing rain. Out to the west, the Alaska Peninsula, parts of the Aleutians, Pribilofs, we're not looking for any of that major winter weather right now. In fact, even the wind shouldn't be that bad. Gales at worst. Heavy freezing spray, though, still a problem for the central and eastern Beaufort Seacoast. We'll talk about that coming up in the marine section in a little bit. But considering the wind, again, this is where we really start to see the wind pick up into Thursday for the upper Kobuk and Noatak valleys all the way into the upper Koyukuk and generally west of Fort Yukon. It looks like there will be enough wind to blow around any new snow that's not packed down just yet. Most of it is still pretty light. You can still see a ribbon of freezing rain potentially from southwest into the central interior for tomorrow afternoon, and that stretches into the Copper River Valley as well before things start to dry up a little bit. Rain continues around south central and southeast with a weak area of low pressure coming into the Dixon entrance, and snow will continue across the region all the way from Nenana northward into places like Fort Yukon and well, not quite to Arctic Village, but all the way west toward Unalakleet. Generally south of Galaman, we're not looking like this is going to make its way into Nome right now. Out to the west of that, choppy conditions west of the Pribilofs into the central and western chain with a 990 millibar low. Really the big problem, though, is this big high-pressure system sitting up across the Beaufort at 1,035 millibars. As we get into Friday, you can see that high is shifted eastward a little bit, building at 1,000 almost 40 millibars now. And look at the packing of those pressure gradients across the central and southwestern interior. The closer those lines get together, the faster the wind has to blow to equalize that pressure. Mother Nature abhors a vacuum, and it's trying to push all that air into the weaker spots here around those red L's. Those are areas of low pressure. And as that air flows, that wind has to pick up, right, to make its way through the nooks and crannies and to work with the pressure pattern that is set up. Parts of southwest still looking at trailing amounts of freezing rain possibly across the Yukon and Kuskokwim Delta, but the major event will have ended. Things are still going to be in the area, though, still cold enough, still sloppy enough for some freezing rain, but by and large it looks like rainfall across south central and southwest and into parts of St. Lawrence Island. North of that, into the Bering Strait, areas of light snow will be possible. The main focus for snow looks like it shifts out here across the upper end of the Copper River Valley and into parts of southern Yukon. Let's take a look at what it looks like temperature-wise. Up north, it is cold tonight. Arctic Village 9 below, but 23 degrees for Utqiagvik. For Nome, 21. Unalakleet about the same. 30s and 40s for the Bristol Bay region. Almost 50 degrees, in fact, for areas around Pilot Point. 47 around Kodiak, 41 in Homer, Seward, and 30s and 40s for Southeast. High temperatures tomorrow in Fairbanks, only 25. 15 in Fort Yukon. The same for Bettles. About 5 for Anaktuvuk Pass. Teens and 20s for the North Slope. Southwest, look at these Bristol Bay temperatures. 40s and 50s. Coupled up with temps in the 30s just to your north. Again, the freezing rain issue will continue there, 40s and 50s for parts of Southeast. Overnight lows in the interior, below 0 again for Friday morning, 14 below for Arctic Village, 8 for Kaktovik, 21 for Point Hope, 24 for Nome, 40s again for Bristol Bay and Kodiak with high temperatures on Friday, 5 in Fort Yukon, 19 in Fairbanks, and lower 40s for the Cook Inlet region.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And on to aviation weather now. IFR concerns will continue around Southwest and out toward the Pribilofs as we get into your Thursday morning. And once again, flying concerns will really focus on any threat of freezing rain. Right now, it still looks like there is a decent threat that will continue around and along the Kuskokwim Valley up to the Yukon Valley. Eastward, that diminishes, but ceilings will still be low, and IFR concerns will continue there. Prince William Sound all the way down to the Barren Islands, Kodiak Island, and down toward the Shumagins. That should continue as well. Low ceilings and viz for areas in Southeast as rain moves in, and for the North Slope, improving conditions there, but as you come out of Anaktuvuk or Adigan Pass, conditions are still going to be fairly low there. So again, a lot of limitations here across the North Slope all the way through Thursday afternoon. Marginal conditions around the coastal areas as we go through the afternoon, and again, widespread marginal for most of the Bering Sea and most of the Aleutians, Bristol Bay included. Areas around the Kilbucks likely looking at IFR with some improvement as we get into the afternoon for ceiling and viz for Thursday. As we get into Friday, look for IFR to be fairly widespread across the Copper River Valley and the Upper Tanana. As you get out across the Gulf, generally IFR concerns will linger here around a broad area of low pressure, that also pushing moisture and low ceilings into parts of Kodiak Island, the Barrens, and up the western side of Cook Inlet. Most of the Susitna Valley looks to be marginal right now. Most of Southwest, marginal, but you can see IFR concerns from St. Lawrence Island to Nunivak Island and the Yukon Delta, generally north of the Kuskokwim, and then limited IFR around northern parts of Southeast and southern Southeast closer to Hyder. Chilkoot and White Pass will be included in that. And as we get into the afternoon, look for some improvements across northern parts of Southeast. South Central should see some VFR, maybe a hint of sunshine here and there around Cook Inlet, the Forelands, all the way up into the Susitna Valley and Talkeetna. West of that, we expect to see IFR from Makoriuk and all the way up toward Gamble and Savunga. Marginal conditions for the chain. Some breaks in that overcast, perhaps around parts of Southwest, Bristol Bay, Pilot Point, maybe Port Heiden. IFR concerns there lingering around Castle Cape, Chignik, and all the way up toward Kodiak. And again, the Barren Islands and the Kenai Fjords and Seward. Here's your pass conditions in detail for tomorrow. Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass look to be pretty low, really most of the day. It doesn't look so great to get through those on your Thursday. For Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, we expect to see IFR all day long. Rainy Pass, Windy Pass, and Isabel Pass, all expected to be instrument flight rule as we go. Mentasta Pass, at this point, looks to be marginal. There will be some IFR in the area, but right now you might be able to sneak through if you're good with marginal conditions. IFR for Tanita Pass, it looks like, for most of your Thursday, and for Portage Pass, of course, and Chilkoot and White Pass at this point look to be instrument rated. Freezing levels show that very warm and wet layer is still sitting over southwestern Alaska. The key point in this decision is where is the surface freezing line, and that undercuts all the way down south of the Kuskokwim and up toward the western Alaska range, or the Alaska range, the western side of that. This entire area here is experiencing overrunning. And that is bad news for getting more ice. It does look like freezing rain will at least be a threat for the next 24 hours there in this zone along and south of the Yukon and up into northwestern parts of the upper Kuskokwim. So keep watch on the forecast weather there, but after 0.65 inches of accumulating ice in Bethel there, that's just a sign of what is possible in a weather situation like this, and that is no good for aviation. For southeast, levels there above 6 to even 8,000 feet. North of that, Cold stuff, no problem at all. As we look at icing potential, then this is the zone I'm talking about. Below 1,000 feet, there is still a significant risk for potentially freezing rain there. So monitor your local forecast there. Isolated severe icing possible below 1,000 feet. Elsewhere, levels are a lot higher, 6 to 8, even 10,000 feet across parts of the eastern interior, south central, southeast, all the way out across the Pribilofs. The jet stream right now has high pressure parked across the Chukchi. Northerly winds are trying to come in. The southerly flow is still winning, though, with that warm, wet air working into west and southwestern Alaska, ridge of high pressure here across the west coast of the U.S. Not winning right now. Southerlies are working in across the Gulf, anywhere from 15 to 35 knots. A broad easterly strengthening flow across the Brooks Range, and you can see that shaping up here at 3,000 feet. Look at that wind coming in from east to west, 30 to 50 knots there. Working in. So north of the Yukon, you're really going to run into some turbulence, and that's exactly what we've got painted in here. Below 4,000 feet, widespread, considerable, moderate. Probably some isolated severe, mainly due to speed at lower levels, but probably some directional shear here as that's moving in. So watch for that out around St. Lawrence Island, looking for some considerable moderate, and also across the central and western chain. A little bit of chop developing across southern parts of southeast as we go into Thursday afternoon and Friday. Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and joining me once again is Cindy Preller. She is the Tsunami Program Manager for the National Weather Service in Alaska region. Thanks for joining us again, Cindy.
Thank you, Dave.
We're talking about tsunami awareness and safety here in Alaska especially, and one of the things that has been one of your main focuses is the Tsunami Ready program. What is that, and how do Alaskans find out more?
Awesome. Yeah, Tsunami Ready is a National Weather Service hosted program in partnership with Storm Ready.
Okay.
And it is a program that we conduct with our partners in the state, but it's mostly community driven. So if a community wants to become Tsunami Ready, well, the first thing they need to do is get a hold of me or their local WCM at a weather forecast office or their tsunami team at the state level.
So, and this is something that's a NOAA grant, so there's money available to help encourage the preparedness at the local level there in the city or the village. Yeah. What are some of the places that have done this already?
Oh, our oldest Tsunami Ready city is Seward,
Good.
You know, but also Sitka, Homer, Valdez are the, you know, the main players, but we've got several Tsunami Ready communities that I'm very proud of. It takes several years to accomplish this. And so a few of the things that they do is the tsunami risk will be assessed by someone like me or another scientist will help find out, you know, really what their probability is. We'll create an inundation map, an evacuation map. They'll have a mitigation plan. We will set up some partnerships with the schools, make an evacuation shelter, and then they need to practice. But it is the city that owns the program, really. It's up to them. And many cities would like to have sirens, and so we help them get those, and, you know, and they practice. They have to practice.
Sure. So let's say I'm driving into a place like Seward that's tsunami ready. What are some of the things I should look for as maybe a visitor so I know maybe where I need to go or can be more aware of my tsunami risk?
Absolutely. The Tsunami Ready signage is really blatant. It's this, you know, blue and white curling wave sign, and there's different shapes of signs that'll show you if you are in the hazard zone or where the evacuation routes are and when you're out of shelter.
Okay. So this is a multi-step process that helps the residents be more aware of their own risk, but then also prepare for when that risk arrives.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, you know, many communities sound their sirens daily, some sound them weekly, you know, to make sure everybody knows what they mean. And there's often drills. We have an annual drill once a year. We have Tsunami Awareness Preparedness Week, and that's a good time for each community to do some exercising.
Okay. And is this a program that is unique to Alaska?
Absolutely not. It's national.
Okay.
And all over the country, you'll have the same signage, so it's consistent.
Good. So if I'm taking the kids to California, I should be able to see something familiar.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, some communities hesitate because they think it'll discourage tourism. And so I would like to tell those communities that what they're actually doing is they're encouraging responsibility.
Sure.
The tsunami is going to happen.
Right.
And it's going to hit every coastline. So, you know, it's not about when, it'll be any time. So the fact that they're showing tourists that they are making steps to be prepared for this, I think would encourage people to want to stay there.
Right, and that would be no different than, say, you or I visiting the Midwest, where we know there's going to be really bad thunderstorms and maybe there's a risk for tornadoes. We're aware of that risk when we go there.
Absolutely. If I see a sign for a tornado shelter, I'm going to remember that.
Right. Okay. All right. So we're just doing a better job of being more prepared with something that's bound to happen again.
I hope so.
Okay. Very good. Where can people go again to learn more about the Tsunami Ready program here in Alaska?
Well, one, there is a Tsunami Ready website. So, you know, just Tsunami Ready,
Google
and that'll
Tsunami
get you
Ready.
there.
Okay.
And then probably the best person for people to contact is their warning coordination meteorologist at their local weather forecast office, which is Anchorage or Juneau, most likely.
Okay. All right. So most of the folks along the Bering Sea coast, again, are not at a huge risk for tsunamis.
No, they don't need to worry about it.
Okay,
Thank
very
you.
good. But always learning to be prepared no matter where you are in Alaska, no matter what the risk, always a good step. And tsunami is a major player in that, as we well know from events like 1964.
Alaskans are resilient. I really believe in them.
Very good, very good. Well, Cindy, thank you so much for joining us again, and please make an effort to learn more about the Tsunami Ready program in your village and town if you haven't already. We'll be back with Cindy again next time to talk more about the Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer, Alaska. We actually have a group of geologists working for the National Weather Service, so scratch your head on that one and we'll join you next time. I'll see you next time on Alaska Weather Packs.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And here's the latest and greatest on your sea ice for this November 6th. We continue to see some growth here across the Beaufort Seacoast. Marginal ice is expanding north and west of Kaktovik, and you can see new marginal ice here around Utqiagvik and points east. Not a whole lot down the Chukchi Coast. We do have some new marginal ice inside of Kotzebue Sound on the upper end of the Norton Sound region and along the northern part of the Yukon Delta. A lot of this is going to get chewed up, though, as warmer air is working northward. A lot of this is still very, very fresh and still very, very temporary, I guess, for lack of a better word. We'll continue to see changes up across the Beaufort as well, with a lot of wind working through the region. Let's take a look at the forecast in southeast now. Northerlies working down the Lynn Canal, 15 knots on 3-foot seas. They're extending into the Stevens Passage region. Southeasterlies through Clarence Strait, 20 knots, 8-foot seas. A southeasterly flow working up the outer coast as well, 15 to 25. We're looking at 7 to 9-foot seas on Thursday. That should diminish a little bit to about 6 to 7 feet north of Sitka, but south of that, seas are coming up 8 to 10 feet there outside of the Dixon entrance and south of Port Alexander. East and southeasterlies strengthening to 20 knots. Building winds out of the Lynn Canal coming out of the north too, 30 knots and 6-foot seas. Southeasterlies working their way up from Clarence Strait, but running into northerlies in Stevens Passage at 25 knots with a 5-foot sea on Friday. For southeast, northeasterlies continue inside of Prince William Sound. 3-foot seas expected there. Southeast winds outside of Hitchinbrook entrance, 15 knots and 9-foot seas. Looking for 8 to 9-foot seas across the Barrens. Stronger winds over the western Barrens out of the east, 30 knots there. And northeasterlies coming down Cook Inlet, 20 to 25. 5 to 7-foot seas expected there, with 5 to 8-foot seas building in on Friday. Northeasterlies go light across Prince William Sound, 15 to 20 across northern and western parts of the Gulf. 6 to 7-foot seas continue with 10-foot seas across the western Barrens on Friday. For Bristol Bay, look for an easterly flow, 25 knots with a 4-foot sea. Southeasterlies a little lighter as you head down the coast with 4-foot seas expected. 10 to 20 knots between AKwx and Sand Point. 6 to 8-foot seas there on Thursday. South and easterly winds coming over Kodiak Island, generally 20 knots with about 5-foot seas inside of Shelikof Strait, 9-foot seas out to sea. It looks like seas will hold around 6 to 7 feet for most of the Alaska Peninsula down the Pacific coastline. 4 to 5-foot seas continue for the Bering Sea coast, 15 to 20 knot winds from the north and east, and 20 knots inside of Shelikof Strait for Friday. For the Aleutians, a little bit choppier there as you head out to the west. North and westerly winds are coming through Kiska and Shemya with 11 to 14-foot seas, 20 to 25 knots for most areas, maybe a few areas north of Nikolsky out toward Adak and Atka holding around 30 knots there. All coming in mostly from the west and northwest. Southerly winds will be generally lighter north of Unalaska to Nikolsky with a 7-foot sea on Thursday. For Friday, light northeasterly winds develop across the eastern chain, 10 to 15 there, but we'll still hold on to that west and southwesterly flow working its way across the central and western part of the chain. Look for 7 to 11 foot seas across the Pacific, 6 to 9 foot seas across the central and eastern chain. Out to the west, those seas are building 11 to 13 feet as you head into Friday. For the west coast, northeasterly winds will be blowing out of the Norton Sound region from St. Lawrence Island all the way down toward the Pribilofs, 30 to 35 knots with 8 to 14 foot seas in the region, 6 to 7 foot seas possible around St. Paul and St. George, thanks to low pressure hovering right around here. So this weather will be in control of that more southern system, it looks like, as we go through Thursday. And for Friday, easterlies continue 20 to 30 knots, looking for 6 to 8 foot seas in the area, 7 to 10 foot seas between the Pribilofs and St. Matthew, 25 knots there with a 10 foot sea expected on Friday. And then for the Beaufort Seacoast, looking for 10 to 15 knots, 3 to 4 foot seas in the region. Looking for some stronger winds blowing off of Point Hope and Point Lay and Cape Lisburne, anywhere from 35 knots or so with 8 to 12 foot seas, 7 foot seas outside of Kotzebue Sound. Northeasterlies coming off of the Bering Strait and off of Point Clarence, 35 knots and 12 foot seas expected in the region. For Friday, easterlies will continue across the Beaufort, 25 knots and 5 foot seas there, with about 8 to 9 foot seas across the Chukchi Coast, 30 to 35. So once again, any of that ice that's close to the shore will be on the move and is in danger of really just not even surviving. Tonight's weather includes a lot of freezing rain across southwest and into the interior. Interior amounts will be lighter, but there will still be some glazing possible on the roads, and snow will be possible in many areas across the interior and west. So from about the interior around Fairbanks, west to Koyukuk, south toward Unalakleet, and generally north of Grayling. This is where we expect to see most of our snow. South of that line, though, is where we're going to see a better chance of freezing rain. That threat continues into Thursday and gradually breaks up as we head into Friday, with snow working its way eastward into the Copper River Valley.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.